Thank you everyone for joining today's online meeting, co-hosted by Art Busan and Design and Korea Arts Management Service. My name is Seok Ho Jung, and I'm a director at Art Busan. I'll be moderating today's session, and today we'll be having a panel discussion under the following topic: the shift and changes in the art world, and forecasting new opportunities and challenges beyond pandemic. And today I'm very happy and honored to have invited four very special guests, each of us whose names are very significant to anyone who has the least interest in the contemporary art market. I think their names need no further modifier or description. So first, we have today Armin Resch, founder of Armin Resch Gallery, with spaces in Paris, Brussels, London, New York, and most recently in Shanghai. Nice to have you today, Armin.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Next, we have Magnus Renfrew, co-founder and co-director of Taipei Damdai Art Fair. Thank you for joining today early in the morning from London.
Thank you.
And then we have Esther Schipper, founder of Esther Schipper Gallery in Berlin, one of my personal favorite galleries in the world. Always nice to see you, Esther.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Mr. Tadeusz Ropak, founder of Gallery Tadeusz Ropak, with beautiful spaces in Salzburg, Paris, and London. So it's a pleasure to be connected with you, Tadeusz.
Hello, good morning.
So I would like to begin this session, my first question to Tadeusz and Armin. So both of you have founded your galleries in Europe, which have developed today as one of the global powerhouse galleries. And over the past few years, we could see your growing interest and presence in the Asian art market as well. Could you speak about the importance of the Asian market for your galleries and how you make collaboration efforts and artistic exchange to promote cross-cultural dialogues?
How we do that, Tadeusz?
Yes, please, yeah.
Say something, then I talk again, like we.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I think the Asian market is extremely important. Nobody can say the contrary, due to its large scale, first of all. And well, it's a quite old relationship for me, especially Korea, where collectors have been expert collectors since long, because they looked at Western art early on, from like late 60s, I think. And so we know, I think we all know some very knowledgeable and quite very experienced collectors in Korea. And it's probably a bit different for China. Some are newer, but they are very much desiring to know more and to collect. So it's also very interesting because they are passionate and they are young often. And well, also, of course, Taiwan and Japan. Japan is also older a group of collectors and even younger ones, but they are interested in Western art since very long. So yes, for me, it's very important. And we have exchange, of course, because we show some Korean artists. I show two older masters since very long, Ha Jung-hoon and Kim Seong-yeol. And we bring to Asia Western art in the gallery in Shanghai, and Chinese and Koreans in Europe. So there are lots of exchange, and we work with some museums for museum shows in Japan, in Korea, in China. So it's very fruitful and very promising. It's already good, but it's very promising too. I think Tadeusz, if you want to
Sure.
say.
Yes, well, I mean, I can only add to what you already had said and agree with everything. Asia became a very important part of the art world. I don't say only the art market, because I think what Asia is also strong is to adding incredible artists to this international art scene. And I've been going to Asia since 25 years now, and first I went actually to Korea and to Japan, and then later on only to China. I was able to organize an exhibition of George Baselitz with the National Museum in Seoul more than 20 years ago. So I think my starting point in Asia was Korea, and I met the most incredible people there, you know, people who have a great knowledge, as Almin said, and who are very curious about art in general, but also Western art. So in a way, it was important to introduce artists which we worked with to these markets, but we had an incredible audience which were very open to learn, to go, you know, with what we tried to present and to show. But it was important also, as Almin said, that we were open to look at the art which is produced in Asia. And I was lucky. 20 years ago, I met Lee Bull, a great Korean artist living in Seoul, and we have done many projects in Europe. So it was a great exchange by looking into artists in Japan, in Korea, in China, and to introduce artists from the Western world, from artists who live in Europe or in America. And it was difficult in the beginning. I remember in the late 90s, you know, when we had the first exhibitions organized with some of our artists. I remember I went with Gilbert and George to China many years ago, and it was the first introduction of their work to Asia. And there was more curiosity than strong interest, but every step led to the next one. And I think 20 years later, I think we are in one of the most active parts of the art world, producing incredible art, which has to be shown internationally. You know, I think Asian artists have their strong share in Europe, in America. And on the other hand, the strong interest in European and American artists there. So in a way, I think all this 25 years I'm active in Asia, I felt a constant development in the great direction. So, and in a way, it feels it's only the beginning. You know, we've come a long way, and I think both audiences are very sensible. You know, the European and American audience curious to know what is going on in Asia, and who are the artists today, and which are the great curators who kind of also create a different context for artists, you know, showing they're from Europe or America. And on the other hand, you know, to see, you know, what is in this creative field and how could we exchange this, and not only doing exhibition of Asian artists in Europe and European artists in Asia, but also bring them together and create like this new context. So I think every year it gets more intense, more sophisticated, more knowledgeable on both ends. I think we have to learn, and I think we want to learn about Asia and to look at art produced there and also how it's presented, because Asian curators look differently to European and American artists, which I think we can learn from. So I think it's a constant exchange, and it's also a constant move. So we never feel this is the way to look at art from different parts of the world. And I think this constant change, I think, makes it very lively. And I think I'm very happy to be part of this exchange.
Okay, thank you for your responses, and it was interesting to know that for Tadeusz, your first connection to Asia was actually from Korean collectors, and by hearing from Armin's response, I get the sense that in Asia you work and collaborate with a lot of younger generation collectors in Asia? Whether
In China, especially, they are incredibly young, I must say. In Korea, it's more established collectors, I would say. But some are very established in China too. But Korea has a more knowledge already for many years. It's a bit different.
I see. And now the next question I have for Esther. So your gallery is very active globally and has a strong interest and also reputation in Asia, with renowned artists such as Thomas Saraceno, Philippe Parano, Ugo Rondinone, only to name a few. And also a beautiful installation by Jan Veronica Janssens was one of the highlights during Connect BTS exhibitions in Seoul in the beginning of this year. But you have a very different business strategy from, for instance, Tadeusz Ropak or Armin Resch. So instead of opening physical gallery spaces in other locations, you communicate and make all key decisions directly from your gallery in Berlin, which is something we often see from German galleries. So could you tell us briefly how you were able to connect with your clients in Asia and also in other non-European regions?
Yes, we basically started more than like 10 years ago to have local representative. So we don't open spaces, but we have people on the ground. We have somebody with us who is a Korean representative, for instance. We have somebody on the ground in Taipei, but we also have a South American representative who lives in New York. We have people all in different places in Europe. And then we work very strongly on an institutional representation or on project like with BTS and this incredible work by Anne Veronica. We have done also a lot of exhibitions for our artists in museums in China, but also in other places in Asia. So we thought that for a first step, it would be better, as we really want to focus on production, on exhibition production, rather than to have too much different things happening at the same time. We really wanted to have our strong part in Berlin in having like big new exhibitions, which we then make travel often more in public spaces than in other galleries.
Okay, and I also assume art fairs have been one of the primary sources for you to meet and connect with new collectors in other regions, if I'm correct.
Yes, yes, and also a lot of traveling. I mean, for instance, with Japan, we had like, we're working with Japanese collectors since a long time, some almost 20 years. Some people have been very, very close to the gallery, and to regularly go and visit and see people is also a big part of our work.
Okay, so then maybe could you tell us how the ongoing pandemic and the cancellation of the most art events, including the fairs, have impacted or changed your gallery's business strategy in the short and long term?
Is this a question for me or for all?
Or for Esther, you.
Okay. On one hand, it was certainly one of the biggest challenges this year. On the other hand, in the light of all the conversation on climate change and on trying to figure out how to be maybe more aware about our carbon footprint, the idea of now be forced to develop other forms of communication and other forms of business, has been an interesting learning curve this year, I would say. It's also in the last year, a lot of people were complaining about fair fatigue. I also think that the artists partially were kind of really fed up of always producing for art fairs. So we have been extremely active in developing all kinds of digital, but also content platforms. And we have been very, very active locally. I had the impression that we kind of forgot a bit our ties to our own country and city. And being like more present in Berlin also helped us to start to envision other forms of exhibitions and of events. So it has been, on one hand, a real challenge to to reconsider our ways of working. But on the other hand, I think it's been very fruitful. And there's certainly a lot of lessons learned we will take on with us in the future.
Okay. I think it's a crisis like this is also could be considered as an opportunity to re-strategize. And for you, just like what you said, you could also now focus more on your region, so your country and your city, and the collectors who are based there. Just like we saw during the Gallery Week in Berlin. I remember visiting your gallery and hearing from your gallery staffs that the visitors were mostly coming in from Germany, and then it was in a sense a bit less crowded than the previous years. But then I remember you recalling that it's, in one sense, it's also good to be able to have this really sincere and intimate one-to-one dialogues and conversations with every visitor, every collectors. So in that sense, it's something that you weren't really able to do as much in the previous years, when there were just huge crowd gathering during the openings.
I think that not only we are traveling, I mean, I'm traveling almost next to nothing, a bit in Europe, to Paris, to Brussels, to Amsterdam, Vienna, but not really much further away. But it's also the same for a lot of our local clients, who also have, as business people, being really very, very active on their ways throughout. I mean, some of our biggest German clients are people who are traveling as much as we do. So it's more like we really have the impression that not only us, but everyone is more back at home and interested into what is happening locally. The gallery weekend this year was extended, and it was a 5 days event, which basically spread out also the opening hours. So that enabled a lot of people to come and see the exhibitions, as we had to be careful about the number of people entering the space, etc. And it has been very, very successful. I mean, it's obviously a big challenge that instead of having one big evening event and maybe another morning event, you have over 5 days from 10 till 7 or 8, constant flux of people. But it was extremely well attended, at least from our local German Berlin institutions and collectors. So yeah, we really have the feeling it all brings us a bit nearer together. And we're also trying to develop new formats with colleagues here in Berlin of doing more collaborative exhibitions, a bit back to the roots as we started in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's a lot of fun to do these things.
Okay, thank you for your response. And the next question is finally for Magnus. One of the names that stood out to me this year was really Taipei Dandai. Your fair has been very strong and successful even in 2020, while we have witnessed the domino effect of cancellation after cancellation of most art fairs globally. And on top of this, in May, you launched Taipei Connections, which was, to me, was a real surprise, and I was really impressed as well, which was an online initiative to support and connect with your participating galleries and also with your audiences in Taipei. And likewise, in November, we just had Art Busan, our own fair, and Shanghai Art Week with Westbund and Art21, which all took place physically and in online, each of which attracted a lot of enthusiastic local collectors who had long been waiting for this moment, this offline art fair. And together with Taipei, Damdai, and now Asia Pacific seems to be least affected during this pandemic. And in this respect, the fairs in Asia Pacific are given more spotlight to the audiences in the West. Could we possibly consider this as an opportunity for not only Taipei, Damdai, or any one specific fair, but also for Asia Pacific region to gain momentum in the global art world?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I remember very clearly the situation in 2009 with sort of post global financial crisis. That crisis kind of accelerated the process of people becoming much more aware of the possibilities of Asia. And the conversations I was having in 2008 with galleries for the first edition of Art Hong Kong were very different from the ones that I had sort of post the global financial crisis hitting. For us at that stage, it was very real to us. Lehman Brothers were actually our lead sponsor for the inaugural Art Hong Kong. So it was quite a close direct relationship that we had. But I see a parallel with today. I think that when you have these global systemic shocks, that really quite often it accelerates a process that's already happening. And my feeling is now that Asia is really becoming of mainstream interest to the international art world. It's no longer seen as groundbreaking or revolutionary to go and spend significant proportion of time and effort on establishing one's relationships in the region. So I do see this as a moment where, you know, also backed up by the fact that things are you know, not so buoyant in anywhere in the world at the moment, that people are looking to spread their audiences and to build their audiences in different parts of the world.
Okay, thank you. And the two most noticeable shifts in the art world since the pandemic seems to be first the rise of the online platforms, and second, the local being the new global. And yet each has its own limits, as we have all seen. So even if fairs take place physically, they cannot attract as many international audiences or galleries as they used to, due to travel restrictions or strict quarantine policies. So this is not only true for Busan or Shanghai, but it was also true in Europe. And so in many cases, the online fair is presented as a supplement, even when a physical fair can take place, which was also the case of our own. And I would like to ask Irene and Magnus, could you speak about your experiences and impression on online platforms and the physical events that are taking place this year during the pandemic, and how they are similar or different from those in the previous year?
Yes, well, I think that's the only lucky part in the pandemic. We are lucky it happens now, because I think if it was like only 6-10 years ago, it would be a catastrophe, because now we have great tools. And frankly, it was very, very useful to have all the online possibilities to connect our clients, the online fairs, the online shows each gallery does by itself without being connected to a fair. And so we are at a point where technology helped us a lot. And I think the art market Also, we see auction houses do that, and they are very successful like us. And if we did not have that, I don't know how this would have been, you know. So this is a good part, but nothing, of course, can be as good as seeing an artwork in person. Nothing can change that. But for instance, right now you have the fairs in Shanghai at this moment. And well, they are maybe finishing today or something, or yesterday night, I forget. And it was really great because also the Chinese people are very organized. They follow the government restrictions. They have the apps on the phone. They really do they ask the time, they say the time they will come to the fair, it's registered. Everything was so well organized that, you know, Shanghai is a huge city with huge crowds, but there was a lot of people and the flux were very regulated and it functioned very well. So, but then we did not do an online platform because both fairs were already very active. Well, but when there is no fair, we have good tools right now. That's what I can see. And in that way, I think we're lucky.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Almeen. I think that we are extremely fortunate that it's happened at this particular moment in our technological advancement and communications advancement. I think that it's been a very interesting time to see how galleries and art fairs and auction houses have adapted. And there's been a really kind of rapid learning. I think rapid experimentation, rapid failure, rapid learning, and things have come on quite a long way in quite a short period of time. I think that I don't know if it's a reflection of the sentiment of the market at the moment as well, but the feedback that I've had from galleries throughout the conversations that I've had about their experiences on the online viewing rooms is that it tends to favor artists who are quite well known already, and collectors are tending to look over things that they already are familiar with, or perhaps have collected or considered collecting. And so there's an area which hasn't really seemed to be quite so well catered to, which is that sort of discoveries element of things. And I don't know about the experience of the panelists today, but some of the feedback I've had is that for these younger artists, that it's perhaps been slightly more challenging to try and get the airtime for them. I've heard also that the volume of the viewing rooms and just the amount of material that's coming onto the market in these contexts is something that some of the galleries sometimes find quite challenging, because once you've shown this material in this very public way, then that material has been shared with the market already to a degree, and one has to then work very hard to make sure that all of those things are placed. So I think that there are challenges there as well, but it's been I think that the art world has been quite behind the curve in terms of its engagement with technology, and I think that this has been a wake-up call to everybody, and it's been very interesting that the volume of conversations that there've been around this subject as well. I think everybody's been kind of asking each other what they think, and that's been an interesting dynamic.
Thank you for your responses, and to briefly talk about our own situation. From our perspective, online platforms and online viewing rooms seem to have already become a sort of trend from the West after all the cancellation of the fairs. So whether you like it or not, and regardless of the controversy of its impact, its effectiveness, we need to also present one together to join that trend, and also for promotion purposes. So that was also one of the reasons why we added the online platform on top of our physical fair. And the next question I would like to ask Tadeusz and Esther. So when we only look at the most recent events, so basically Art Busan and West Fund, I found something personally interesting. So all three galleries here have participated in both Busan and West Fund, but each made its own very different strategic decision. So Thaddeus Wilpak has participated physically in both Busan and West Fund. And Imanmesh is taking part in our online fair and has physically participated in West Fund. And Esther Schipper is participating in both Busan and West Fund, but both in online platform. So I would like to ask, and I'm curious to know if your decision and experience this November with both fairs have influenced your thoughts and strategy for your upcoming events and the for the Asian art market?
Well, should I start? Okay. Yes, you know, it was of course very positive that Busan offered a real fair, physical fair, and the same with West Fund. And you know, we're building up a team in Asia, and I'm very lucky to have, you know, some, you know, strong parts of members of our team who are specializing in these markets. You know, we have Q, who is Korean, who lives in London, and who took this on. She wanted to do Busan before the whole crisis started, so she became a strong advocate for Korea, and she wanted us to be present there. And you know, we learned a lot about the Busan Biennial. We had some of our artists who were invited there. So there was a strong connection already beforehand, as I said before, to Korea. And I'm lucky to have, you know, in our team, strong people who work there and who are able to go there. The same with Nick Buckley-Wood, who is our Asian director. He lives in the area. Still, it was very complicated to travel, to go to China, to go through 2 weeks of you know, kind of quarantine and to prepare this fair. So it was not easy to prepare these fairs, but I think you can only do it if you have people on the ground in the area who are able to prepare everything and to connect, you know, the gallery program to the people there. You cannot just do it by, you know, hiring people for a fair. So everything has to be prepared on the long run. We haven't really changed so much our plans for the future. I think, you know, the crisis, I believe, is a temporary crisis, and very soon we will go back to a certain normal. We will learn from it. And it was interesting what Esther said, and I believe the same, that ecologically, I think we will maybe have hopefully used this crisis to improve and to be more aware of our carbon footprint. But on the other hand, I think, you know, there's a certain normality which comes back, and our aim is just to connect our artists with Asia, to be curious about Asian artists and bring them to Europe. This will not change. There is no way to kind of change physical exhibitions and also physical fairs. And we will definitely keep participating in the ones we feel they make sense for our artists. And also there are certain parts of the world where fairs are taking place. They're introducing the local scene to an international audience. So Busan, thanks to the fair, is also becoming a player. And before, we wouldn't know so much about Busan. And I think, you know, a continuous success of a fair, which goes beyond the fair, because it also involves the local galleries, it involves the museums there. They created a biennial, and I think the international art world is becoming much more interested in what is going on and to learn about. So I think, you know, the effect is not only the art market and to go to a place to place or to sell some art, it is also to really connect on. And I have to say, going to these fairs in Asia, I learned myself a lot about the places. Going to Taipei, you know, we learned about Taiwan and about the art world there. I think it is much more than only coming to a place a few days, trying to sell some art. I think you really build bridges, you build connections, and therefore our plans for the future is really to continue to intensify this and to be as open as possible, as curious as possible for these places which we want to learn about. And on the other hand, also to introduce our artists. All the online platforms are very important. And we were lucky that we already started long before the crisis to develop this. So I think it didn't take us by total surprise. We already had a team installed in London, especially, who works on these online presentations. The next step is virtual reality. I think it's something we also believe very strongly in it. So you physically almost can enter a space on your computer and take your own base, walk around, see works from different angles by using the room on this virtual reality space to create your own walkthrough. I believe in all of this, and I think it's important that it pushed the art world even further in this direction. But I really think, there is absolutely no way to exchange this for the physical experience of the power an art piece can have on you while walking into a space. So organizing exhibitions and introducing our artists by their real artworks in different parts of the world will always be our aim.
Okay, thank you. And Esther, do you have something to add to Tadeu's comments?
I completely agree with Thaddeus. I have to say, I personally enormously regret that we were not able to personally, physically come to Shanghai and Busan, especially with Busan, as we had developed a rather ambitious project, but that was also the reason why at the end we decided to only participate online. It would have been the first time for us to be in Busan, and we made a huge effort to really have a very good presentation. And I didn't thought that we will be able to match what we had planned. And also I would not have been able to come in person. And I found it, especially to start off something new, to not really start on the right level of quality and presence. I just thought this feels wrong. This is a tendency I have at the moment, that I think you rather not do something than not doing something at the best possible level of quality. On the other hand, we do see that although it's a huge learning curve, all these online platforms are getting slowly more and more kind of appreciated. It's true, I think, Magnus, what you said before, that there's an enormous amount of material suddenly floating around on different platforms and systems. So I also think that we need to rethink exactly how we do things. The XR, the virtual reality rooms, this is also something which is, the technology is moving so fast at the moment that, for instance, the Oculus we bought in the spring to develop our first virtual reality spaces is already out of date by today. So it is something which goes probably also due to the pandemic. This is, the knowledge is there. It's just that it was never really properly tested, and certainly not in our field. So yes, it helps developing a lot of things that we are now really, really have to focus on that. Yes, and as I said earlier, we have, although we are not physically there, a duo Finnish artist we've been working since 20 years with, Bruno Nisanen, just have an enormous survey exhibition at the Seng Museum in Shanghai. So through them, we have been able to be, to offer, yes, this exhibition as something for our local, for our Asian collectors, especially Chinese collectors, to see at least one aspect of our program during this art week now in Shanghai. So it is, we're still, and for instance, in Taipei, we have a lot of artists in different exhibition now with a biennial, but also private foundations. So on that level, we are still very active and personally present.
Okay, so continuing from both of your comments, I wanted to lead on to the next question, and considering the time remaining, I will ask this question for Magnus. So during this unprecedented time of the pandemic in the art world, which is still ongoing today and has already brought many rapid changes, who could be considered as winners and losers? For instance, art fairs, galleries, new platforms, institution, auction houses, artists, certain regions, etc. You name anything. And was there anything or anyone that has grabbed your attention and interest in particular among them?
I think that there are opportunities and challenges for all the different constituencies in the culture that make up the cultural ecology of the art world. As I say, I do think that Asia is becoming first and foremost in everybody's mind. I do think that within the art fair sphere, I think that people are getting very selective about what they're doing. I think that fairs that are founded on domestic markets to a degree have a strong draw because they at present are able to deliver what they say that they can deliver in terms of audiences. So if much like yourselves in Busan, you're able to deliver a strong Korean audience right now. And that's our hope for the future for Taipei as well. I mean, I think that everybody's been very challenged. I think that in terms of the adaptation of technology, the auction houses, in a certain respects, have been. I think the nature of the technology has suited them quite well because people already know what they're looking for when it's coming up at auction, and so I think that the interactions and interfaces that they've developed have been quite effective. And I think that the global evening sale concept, all being virtual and remote, has created very interesting theatre and much wider viewership than these and coverage than these auctions would ordinarily have. So my hope is that art fairs and galleries can find their own vehicle that can be as effective as that. And as I say, particularly with this, those galleries that are showing sort of early and mid-career artists, really finding a way for people to be able to discover and engage with them more effectively than the online viewing rooms format currently allows.
Okay, thank you. And continuing on from this conversation, it'll be the last question we prepared for today before moving on to the Q&A session. And I would like to ask Armin to answer this last question. What will likely return to normal and what will not in the post-COVID-19 art world? For example, traveling to overseas fairs, the role of online platforms, online viewing room, or the current spotlight on the Asia Pacific art market, or anything else that comes to your mind?
Well, this is not a very easy question because we really don't know when things can go to normal. I think normal was maybe not normal before the pandemic. It was really a lot of travel for us. I think we all agree on that, Tadeusz and Esther. And me, I'm quite happy to travel a bit less, I must say. But so I think we would be more careful about when and where we go. And the fairs are necessary, I think, because they are physical events and we go to the people. I mean, when we go to Busan, we don't have a gallery in Busan. And of course, there are museums we collaborate with or institutions in Korea. It's very important, as Esther pointed out. And of course, we do that as much as we can when the curators are interested and when we can collaborate. But it's important to go to our public and show them some works. So I think fairs will go back to normal. Maybe some fairs will not come back because there was always a big fair and so many satellites around. This, I have no idea if it's possible again. Main fairs will come back, I'm sure. But galleries might choose really which ones they really want to participate in. And I think the online platforms will remain, not as many as now, but a parallel program for, we plan and we do a parallel program from the gallery with some online platforms. And I think we will continue that. And we do shows, even if people cannot travel, see them, we do the shows, we hang the shows in Paris, in New York, everywhere, in London. And so of course, this we will continue exactly the same. And I think main cities where you have important museums, where you have active foundations, active art centers, will remain key places for the art market. Like, I mean, Seoul, London, Shanghai, Paris, New York. In Japan, you have Tokyo, Osaka. They have strong institutions which suffer awfully right now, but I hope they all will survive this pandemic, because they have like less than 20% of the public they had. So that means less than 20% of the tickets people buy at the entrance. So this is terrible, but I hope they will all survive, because this is important. And when you have key cities in the art market, you can have key fairs in those countries. So I'm very optimistic. I just think maybe it's going to take time, because who is going to want to dive into a crowd right now? It's, even if there is a vaccine, how long to test this vaccine? How many million of people will accept to have the vaccine, because you can be afraid of having the vaccine on you, you know? So this is not going to be very quickly, I'm afraid. And we might go back to a more soft pace, you know, not as crazy as before the pandemic. I don't know what my friends from galleries and fairs think, but I'm optimistic, but I think the pace will be a bit changed.
Okay, thank you for your valuable feedback. And considering the time remaining, we'll now move on to the Q&A session. And as we were preparing for this, we weren't 100% sure whether we could get the live questions from the audiences in the Zoom webinar. So what we did was to ask our audiences in advance to send us some of the questions they were interested in asking you. So I will ask these questions, and in between, for you audiences, if you have anything you want to add or ask, you could please write them in the chatting or the Q&A option, which you could find below. So as a starter, I will ask a simple question, which many collectors would be interested in hearing from you guys. So Armin, Tadeusz, and Esther, could you tell us about one artist that stands out in your radar, and who our collectors in Korea should definitely keep an eye on? So it could be, of course, someone that you are representing in your program.
Well, I don't know if Esther wants to kind of go ahead to name one. you know, I just try not to answer these questions. It always sounds also like, which one is your favorite artist? Or of course, you can always point an artist and say, we're looking into, you know, we just added some new artists to our program, very young artists who have not had any exposure yet, like Rachel Johnson, who lives in London, and hope that our audience goes with us. But I think it is important to really present your artist as wide as possible. And we work with many artists and many estates. And I think it's important to kind of put our focus on all these artists' work. Each of them deserve an audience, but of course you can always maybe point somebody very young who kind of needs more attention because it's not known yet, and to say this is somebody you should look at. And I would say Rachel Johnson is definitely an artist to look at, and you can figure this out on our different social platforms.
I actually was impressed with her works, with her paintings during the Royal Academy show.
Yes, exactly. Yes, last year. You know, she's very young. We're preparing her first exhibition. We haven't had one yet. She was part of a group show Julia Peyton-Jones had curated in our London space, and we were very impressed. You know, from the same show, I figured it out at the Royal Academy exhibition, and since then we followed her work, got to know her, went to the studio, and I think she will have a strong career, and we're very happy to working with her.
Okay, and maybe Esther or Armin, would your answers be similar to what Tadeusz has said, or if you have anything else to share? Then
I agree. It's important that the collectors look at the new artists we sign in the gallery, because they need more attention than the established ones. And it's difficult for me to name one, but I have a few new artists in the program. Like I can name Genesis Tremaine, who is from New York, and she will get soon quite a lot of attention from museums, but she's really young, she's less than 30, and I believe a lot in her work. But there are others that are less than 30 years old in my program and that are newly with me, like Bonespan, Genesis, and yeah, I cannot name all of them because we do a lot of prospection. So for some reason, it came to a result recently that a few I decided we should sign. So yes, if collectors want to look at the website and check the new ones, this I think is important to support and look at them.
And would Esther, would it be same or similar response?
Yes. I always find that, I mean, I agree completely with Tadeusz. It's very difficult to name one or two artists out of a very, program which we are so active with each of the artists. So it's like telling who's your whatever favorite child, or I find that almost impossible. But it's true that the last month also, because probably we have more time to as Almin called it, to prospect and continue eventually a conversation we had started with artists we wanted to take into the program. At least for me, it's been a good year to focus on the program, on new positions. So we have been taking on new artists, not only young artists. We started to work this year with Jack Lerner from Sao Paulo, who is a well-known Brazilian artist. but also with younger position, like a French artist called Etienne Chambaud, which we are going to show for the first time in next spring. And we're also working on, I'm also really wanting to take more female artists in the program. I found that we have not quite reached an equitable number. So this is also something I'm kind of working on with a lot of attention.
Okay, so I will move on to the next question. Maybe I shouldn't have said you can name one artist from your own programs, but rather from other galleries or yes. Next question I have for Magnus. Actually, I prepared two, but considering the time remaining, I'll ask one that could be more interesting. In the recent years, global fair organizers have been keeping their interest into Asia Pacific to either launch or relocate their Asian fair. And among them, Korea and Seoul, to be specific, is mentioned quite often, along with a few other candidates. I wouldn't specify any names today, but I think our audience would be very interested in learning why many of these global brands consider Korea and Seoul as an attractive fair destination. And also on the other hand, why, for instance, Japan, Tokyo is not mentioned at all in this kind of discussion, considering their significant number of high net worth individuals compared to any other cities in their nearby region. And their huge pool of collectors, collections, and their own blue chip artists.
Well, I think that the art market has developed out of all recognition over the last 15 years. I think that Hong Kong was very much the starting point of people's art fair investigations of the region. But the market has really, I think, built out in many different parts of Asia. And so, in addition to Hong Kong and the big opportunity that's presented by mainland China, I think people are very interested to develop further their relationships, both domestically within different constituencies around Asia, and also within different regions within Asia. When you're looking at a location for an art fair, you're really looking at who your core constituencies are going to be, if you're a hub fair or a domestically driven fair. And I think that with Korea, there's a huge opportunity there for the domestic market to be developed even further. I think that there's such a strong starting point. Even when we were looking at setting up Art Hong Kong 11, 12 years ago, that really Korea and Taiwan were the two strongest domestic markets in Asia. Korea has had an established gallery scene for 40 years, and it really has some of the most sophisticated and engaged collectors. So I think that there is a real opportunity there. With regard to Japan, I think that Japan also has opportunities there for the future. I think that I think very much that when one thinks of fairs, not every fair has to be sort of Art Basel or Frieze. It doesn't have to be the big international fair that brings in everybody from everywhere. And so I think that increasingly you're going to see sort of smaller scale fairs that are perhaps appropriate to the scale of the market. But first and foremost, I think that people want to make sure that there's good quality there, both as an exhibitor, feel that you're showing your artist's work in a context that you'd feel comfortable, but also for growing audiences. It's important to provide a context that's really quality controlled, that participation in the fair becomes almost a stamp of quality that really gives new entrants into the market a sense of confidence that they can't go too far wrong in what they're buying. But I do see that really right across Asia, there are great opportunities, but Korea is certainly a very, very big opportunity.
Thank you for your feedback and comments. I had prepared two more questions, but actually one of them, Armin, Tadeusz, and Esther have already answered indirectly while answering my first question. So it was about your selection procedure and your standards in terms of researching and representing new and upcoming artists. So I think you've somewhat already mentioned that in answering the first question. So I think we will end our session at this point today. So first of all, thank you very much, Armin, Esther, Magnus, and Thaddeus for your time and sharing your valuable insights today. And hopefully we can all meet again in the nearest time, also in an offline setting, and ideally also in Busan. And thank you for all of your continuous continuous support, and not only from the participating galleries, and also Magnus. It was really nice to be finally connected with you. And thank you to all of the audiences who have listened to our session today. So until our next gathering, stay safe, everyone, and healthy. And so we'll close it here. Thank you, everyone, and alles Gutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.